Sadnam, we are Jen and Ramtin from Heart Center Revolution.
Our intention with this podcast is to share the best of Kundalini yoga and conscious living with you so you can live a more heart-centered life. Satnam, and welcome to episode 38 of the Heart Centered Revolution podcast. This episode is the first part of a 3-part series on the 10 characteristics of the Aquarian Age. And so we recorded this one a little bit differently because of coronavirus, classes are canceled and I'm working from home. So we just have more time together. And so we've recorded, the next few episodes, we're recording ourselves together. It's like a discussion, kind of like an invitation into our conversations. So it's kind of fun because you can see, or you probably already know this from listening to the podcast, but as Ramtin and I talk about these things, we can see how I kind of gravitate towards teaching like the earthly, practical, like the application of these spiritual concepts. And Ramtin is a bit more ethereal and spiritual and kind of abstract. And so it does make for a nice complement. And it also highlights how multidimensional these teachings are and how multifaceted we are as human beings. Like there's so many layers of our experience going on at the same time. All right, so a little introduction. So we're talking about 10 characteristics of the Aquarian Age. So the Aquarian Age is, this time period that we're in right now. There was a shift that happened. I think it officially transitioned in 2013. But of course, things don't change overnight. But we are moving from one era into another era. And so this new era that we're coming into is really intense, as you can probably feel. And there's a lot of things changing, and it can feel like the sand is kind of, crumbling beneath your feet. But this is all part of the needed transition to move from the Piscean Age to the Aquarian Age, where, life will be more compassionate, people will be more heart-centered, there'll be more collaboration and cooperation. We're kind of in a transition period, which, just like adolescence for a human being, it's fraught with intensity and polarity and things that don't quite make sense. But the goal is to kind of evolve out of that stage. So these characteristics are fairly dense and deep. And so we broke up the 10 characteristics into 3 separate episodes. Because otherwise I know I would just kind of zone out and, have stuff go over my head. So, we like to make our episodes pretty digestible, and then you can, take some time to process the information and then come back for the next, set of characteristics. And another thing that was interesting is I remember, reading these characteristics when we did teacher training in 2013. So that was 6 or 7 years ago. And then I looked at the copyright, and the copyright for these teachings is 2003. So that was a long time ago. And as I was reading through all 10 of them, it's like, wow, it's almost like fortune telling. It's almost like they were able to predict the future. And as I say in the episode, when I read these things, even in 2013, I was like, not doubting it, but I was like, how does life get really intense? Like, how do these things happen? And then here we are. And indeed, it's like they foretold the future and told of a future society or culture that was even hard to imagine, 6 or 7 years ago, much less 18 years ago when these were written down. And they've probably been taught since the 70s. So it shows a really deep wisdom and insight into the evolution of the human species to be able to kind of predict some of these things. And then at the end of the episode, I will guide you through a short pranayama practice for calming and cooling. And so I think we can all benefit from that from time to time. And then a few kind of heads up things. I accidentally in the audio say that there are 7 characteristics, but there are 10. And then also listening back, I thought that it would help if I repeat the characteristics because they're kind of dense. And so we recorded a conversation between Ramtin and I. And then as I'm here recording the intro and the meditation, I'm going to add in just repeating what the characteristic is so that you can hear it twice. I think that might help the conversation we have make sense. And then if you want a visual, like if you want to read a list of the 10 characteristics, you can visit the website for this episode, heartcenteredrevolution.com/episode 38. All right, let's jump into our discussion.
The discussion that we're having today, the characteristics of the Aquarian Age, is not particular to a certain sign of zodiac, or astrology. Is the era, is this time that we are in right now that has created a certain shift within us internally and energetically. And this energy, this vibration, it happened to be associated with this time and age, which is the Aquarian Age.
That is so well said. And I think for those of us who are adults in this time, like I remember 5 or 10 years ago hearing about this shift to the Aquarian Age and not really believing or understanding like what it meant. Like, so we would hear that things are going to get really intense. And I took the information in, but I had no idea what that would look like. And now fast forward 10 years later and I'm like, oh yeah, like life in general is just more intense. There's more information, there's more pressure. Things are moving so much more quickly. Like so many opinions and beliefs and like all of this noise is being thrown at us that was not the case 10 years ago. And some of it is technology, but a lot of it is just this, there's like an intensified like vibration in the air. And so that's part of this shift that we're experiencing. So for those of us that are adults, we have a big change that we have to adjust to. Whereas kids that are being born now, they'll be used to or more acclimated to this intensity. So for those of us, it requires us to elevate ourselves and to kind of shift how we interact with ourselves and with the world and be very conscious of how we do that. And that's where like these characteristics, there's 7 that we want to cover today of the Aquarian Age can come in. If you can have these in the back of your mind, it can kind of help you make sense of the world today. It can help you make sense of how to interact with it. And so we'll get started. So the first characteristic of the Aquarian Age, so the age we're moving into, is that change and learning are continuous and lifelong. You must maintain mental, emotional, and physical flexibility. So for a second time, change and learning are continuous and lifelong. You must maintain mental, emotional, and physical flexibility. And so this is kind of a departure from the idea that your studying is in your younger years. So you complete school, you complete college, and you've done your learning. And then, from 22 for the rest of your life, you have the same job. And so this aspect of requiring us to be flexible in our beliefs, in our thoughts, in our behavior patterns, in our understanding of ourselves in the world, we really need to adapt this lifelong growth, lifelong learning, and not accept the idea that you're ever going to make it to a certain plateau and just stay there forever. There are, of course, like spurts in learning and growth. And sometimes we enter, a restorative phase where I know I do, where I stop taking trainings. I don't really read books. Like I'm reading fiction books and just resting and zoning out and watching TV. And I'm kind of in a restorative phase. But big picture, lifelong, it's important that we maintain our flexibility and we don't get too attached to the way we view the world. And so you can think about this like prior to coronavirus and COVID-19, like there were things we were attached to and that we took for granted, not for granted, like we didn't appreciate them, but we just accepted it as normal that everyone drive to their jobs and sit there for 40 hours a week. And we're being asked or being forced to reimagine what work looks like. We're being forced to reimagine what life looks like. And coronavirus is just, it's kind of like a distillation of the broader shift that's happening in this shift to the Aquarian Age.
Yes, I agree. It's beautifully said. The only, as we probably heard before, the only constant in our life is the change. That everything changes. So, as human beings, with the level of consciousness we dwell in, that's something to remember, that we need to adapt as everything changes. So, we have to develop the capacity for ourselves to flow with the changes. This is we start the characteristic by allowing ourselves to continuously be changing and be learning. And another way of kind of explaining this or understanding this is that energy doesn't die or get destroyed. Energy just is transformed. So we are energy beings. We're looking at ourselves as spiritual beings. That means we are energy beings. So they're spiritual beings having this human experience. And as we see ourselves as such and see ourselves that we are constantly receiving and giving and transforming energy, then there's always change. There's always something new for us to sort of keep up with and also maintain.
I love that. Like, as you're talking, it made me think of two things. And what you're describing, it sounds to me, it's like we're naturally in a state of constant evolution. Like, as individuals and as a society, we have this constantly evolving nature. And I believe that when we stifle our constant evolution, that's oftentimes what creates the symptoms of depression and anxiety. Like, when we get afraid to evolve and to change and to grow, that can be a source of that, like, life anxiety and depression, at least for me personally. And then when Ramtin was first talking, and I was thinking about attachments and like this ability to be flexible, right? We need to be flexible mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I've been thinking over the past 6 months, we've had a lot of changes. Like, I became pregnant in October, and then we had a miscarriage in February, and then coronavirus hit in March, or at least here where we are. And so there's just been a lot of major shifts in my life in the past 6 months, and it has really forced me to recognize, what am I attaching to that's actually impermanent? And it's like the Buddhist principles that the source of our suffering is the fact that everything is changeable. And if you attach to things that are changeable, that you'll create, that's how suffering comes in. And so I've really been able to evaluate over the past 6 months, what am I attaching to that's impermanent? And I think as human beings, like, you can't not be attached to things, but just being aware of that, and then placing more emphasis on attaching to what is impermanent. And so becoming very highly attached to my highest self, to my soul, to my heart center, and like the compassion and that just like radiance that lives in my heart. And then also being attached to my connection to the divine flow of the universe, to God, to angels, to these things that are going to be with me, whether I get sick or not, whether my family gets sick or not, whether I have a healthy pregnancy or it ends in miscarriage, or like all of these life-changing things are a little bit easier to manage and have forced me to identify, like, to attach to things that are permanent, and then to be flexible about all that is impermanent in my life.
Well said. All right, let's go to the next one.
All right. So number 2, intellect is not enough. We need a new relationship to intuition, emotion, and instinct. Okay, for a second time, intellect is not enough. We need a new relationship to intuition, emotion, and instinct. And now this is a powerful one. What I hear this saying is that we need to move out of our minds and into the other parts of our bodies. So the Piscean age, the prior age, was all about information, intellect, facts. And now we're in a place where facts are disputable, they're flexible. You can have, one fact that you think means one truth and another fact that you think means another truth. And you can just have this constant back and forth kind of duality. And so what this time is calling us to do is to dive deeper than just facts and information, and to really tap into our intuitive ability, to use our emotions. So as your emotions are giving you information and giving you guidance, and then to tap into that instinct. And this all requires you to dive deeper into yourself and get out of your mind. And so kind of quieting the mind for a few moments every day, getting in nature, meditating, kind of all of those things where you shift gears and you shift out of your head and more into your heart. And then for me, my body is part of my intuitive system. Like I'll feel goosebumps on my skin. That gives me information. My body really talks to me. My intuition talks to me through my body. And so it's just about dropping out of that head, out of the mind, out of the constant debating we get to, and then coming into emotions, instinct, and intuition.
Absolutely. We could talk about all these characteristics and the words and the terms that are mentioned here for hours, and break it down in so many different ways. And depending, again, I'm very big on word association and the interpretation of what it is for us. How do we interpret or perceive certain words? What does intuition mean to me? Could be a little different. There's general understanding among certain, depending on your background, the community you're a part of, what you're studying, your belief system. All these words may have a slight different meaning to you. So that's, it is so important for us to define these things when we have a discussion or a conversation with someone else, or when you are following a certain teacher, a certain, someone you're learning from, that to understand their meaning of what this is, it is about what they're talking about, a certain word that they keep using over and over again. So we're not going to break these, we're not going to talk about the meaning here in this discussion right now. But for me, what this means to get out of our intellectual consciousness, and everything for me boils down into consciousness. And again, that could be a different subject matter. And from that level of consciousness, the mental, into our, as Jen talked about, who we are as a human being in a holistic way, into our heart. And the feeling aspect of it comes up. And when we talk about feeling, is sometimes the word feeling and emotion is interchangeably used to describe our energy movement and our connection and association with the outside world and how we feel within. So when we talk about feeling, we're really talking about what we are perceiving through our heart center. And this is the time to make a more coherent connection between the head brain and the heart brain and our gut brain. So when we're using our intuition, when we're using our gut feelings, when we're using our emotions, now we are going beyond just the intellect, just the head brain thinking. And that's what we need to incorporate in our daily actions, daily interactions and actions with others and within ourselves, to really bring out our true power of who we are as human being. And again, that's another thing that some people, a higher conscious person who may have some kind of a negative association with the word power because of how it's advertised and who is it associated to mostly, those things may be preventing us from moving forward with our own intentions and desires in life. So that's something to also we could incorporate later, but we want to stay with the subject matter here.
Yeah. Well, I'm making a list, so I have future episodes on intuition, consciousness, and the gut, heart, and head brain. So we will, over the next few months, probably get those out to you. All right. So the third characteristic of the Aquarian Age is related to the one we just talked about, but it's more externally focused. And so this third characteristic is that information is not enough. Neither is knowledge. We need wisdom. Okay, to repeat that one a second time. Information is not enough. Neither is knowledge. We need wisdom. And so to me, this has never been more prevalent than like if you're scrolling your Facebook feed and it's just information after information, fact after fact. And some are true and some are not, but some are true and contradictory. And so it's just, and then facts are being manipulated, to portray certain agendas. And then you don't know like what the person's intention is behind the fact. And so this idea that like information is freedom or information is wisdom just isn't true anymore, because there's too many facts out there, I guess, and some are contradictory. So what we really need is wisdom. We need to filter through all of the input that we're receiving and really, again, tap into our heart center, tap into our intuition, tap into our own internal guidance system about what is true for us. But that's not enough. We also, in order to get wisdom, we have to have experience with things. You have to interact and engage with things. And so it's about, again, moving away from facts and, pro and con lists and all of that, more things that are more settled in duality, and moving more into the wisdom that's true, not just this week and not just yesterday, but wisdoms and truths that are true all of the time.
Yes, you said a couple of key things here. And again, I'm going to repeat myself about, associations with words. And really it boils down for us, especially with our the basis of our work and our how we want to serve others and what we want to share, is that we as society and globally, individually, society and individually, we need to tap into our heart. We need to understand. There's an understanding, feeling, and just experience, also experiential way of really coming to our own of what that means of tapping to our heart, becoming more heart-centered. So when we talk about knowledge, as we are sort of learned to associate it with, is through the head brain, is intellectual. Wisdom, usually we connect it to someone who has more internal sort of guidance and is more heart-centered. It actually came to me a couple of days ago when I was doing my practice, my meditation is that I don't need to know everything, and I don't know to what percentage what political party is correct or not, or is this, what I hear from information that I hear is correct for any kind of business or whatever it is, or belief systems are right or wrong. What is their intention? So the kind of the phrase that came to me was, I don't know, but I believe. Meaning that I don't need to know to create, to be fulfilled. I don't need to know, and I need to understand to be complete, and to make a judgment on something that's right or wrong. But when I tap into my heart and I believe, and really redefining that for myself, then I'm able to move mountains. Then I'm able to create things for myself that seem not logical, or I wasn't able to do before. Because, and as I do that, I'm truly bringing all of the aspects of who I am as a human being, as a multidimensional being, into the space now that I could really capitalize and be able to use for myself.
And that's like, sorry to interrupt, but we were talking recently about like all these, especially in the US where we live, all these polarities are just rising to the surface, whether it's political or racial or financial, health. Like, it is that those polarities are so intense. And we were talking about this on a walk the other day about, in order to create the magnitude of shift we need to on this earthly plane, we can't rely only on activism and donating and voting and all of that stuff. There needs to be this like quantum shift in consciousness from the conditioned mind and the duality of the mind into the heart center, into compassion, into seeing that we're all one, into all of these things that are available to us through our heart. Because as Ramtin says, and I learned this from him a few weeks ago, and I've just been really keep repeating it to myself, our heart does not live in polarity. It lives in this unified field of consciousness that is real. It's our mind that is creating all of this polarity and duality. And so that just really has been resonating with me lately.
And you mentioned internal guiding system. And really, when we look at our conditional life and our environment, what has been created through the duality of, operationally through the polarized brain, head brain, is that is keeping us away from our internal guidance. Not trusting. We are becoming very dependent on information, on the outside information. That's why there's all this polarity. Who said what? And as we involve ourselves in a certain with a certain group of certain belief system, we keep getting fed with the same information, proving, it's like law of attraction, it's proving that what we have is correct for our individuality. And that's how we're part of this energy field, that as it's just like when you do if you've done a Google search for any item, or if you go on YouTube and you search on the search box for any subject matter, when you go back, you open up your Google or YouTube, you have some recommendations that are relevant to that whatever information that you research for. Same thing, and that could be a metaphor for a law of attraction, that where your thoughts are, it's like your consciousness, what you look for is what is being fed back to you.
And that happens like energetically, but our minds also, like in psychology, you learn about confirmation bias, and our brains, I should say, because it's literally how your brain physically functions. Like if you have a belief, your mind looks for things that confirm your belief, and it'll reject things that don't confirm your belief. So you're actually not an objective interpreter of information. which is why, as this part 3, or this third characteristic, is about coming into your inner wisdom, because your mind is not actually a great filter of information or facts. And then the fourth one, which is somewhat related to the second and third, is that learning is not enough. We must learn how to learn. So to repeat that one again, learning is not enough. We must learn how to learn. And so this again is, I think these 2, 3, and 4 are all, 3 separate ways of kind of getting at the same thing, that information, learning something conceptually is not enough. We need to learn how to learn. You need to learn how to take things within context, and not just like human earthly context, but within the context of your personal evolution as a spiritual being having a human experience, the evolution of our species on this planet, and the evolution of this planet within the universe. And so there are great contexts that need to be taken into consideration when we are learning, that we are taking a more expansive view as we receive information, and that we're not just learning information and spitting it back out. And that you're taking information in and you're assimilating it with your experience, you're assimilating it with the guidance of your soul and your heart, and with this broader expansive view.
Correct. And to me, again, I'm going to keep going back to this, is that learning how to learn. We know that in the educational system doesn't serve every person, because every person has a different way of learning. The children right now, they've been categorized now. It became popular as, the person has this disability of learning, this and this and that, because we try is not a one size fit all, So we try to, incorporate that system of one size fit all to every person. Now we're going to expand that for who we are as human being. When we, again, is the conditional, how we've been conditioned and how we perceive things and how we associate things. It's like, when we think about learning, I'm going to learn something. You think about reading or listen or hearing, and we think our head brain is doing all the work. Jen mentioned something, is that our mind is not a good filter of information. I would put it as our mind, which the head brain, if it's comprised of the head brain functionality, is not a good filter for the truth. But our polarized head brain constantly filtering information, and is not subjective, but not subjectively, but preferably. What does it prefer to receive based on the previous conditioning that it had? So it has a comfort zone, and we could again talk about that and break it down in different ways. But it has a comfort zone. That's what the comfort zone is all about. Our habitual ways of doing things is all about. So learning, if it's done only through the head brain, again, we could break that down to so many different aspects, but we're not going to do that today. But head brain, only through the head brain, then is not enough. Then we're going to always have that conflict. And sometimes more learning creates more conflict. So we have to include our heart brain, which is actually a brain. There's so many scientific evidence and research, and it all has become scientific. And to me, science is beautiful. I love science. Science has been created by us, but through our evolution. Science hasn't created us. We created science. So science comes from spirit. So in order for science to prove spirit, that's the wrong direction. Spirit has created science throughout the evolution of humankind.
Dang, babe, you're good. All right, that wraps up our discussion of the first 4 of the 10 characteristics of the Aquarian Age. The remaining 6 will be in, I think, the next 2 episodes, but if not, they'll come, in the next few episodes. I know for me, listening to these characteristics and talking about them is kind of like focusing on what's wrong. It can kind of create some anxiety or pressure. But just remember that you chose to come here during this time for a reason. If you're on a path that led you to Kundalini yoga, you're probably part of kind of the new leadership, and it's our responsibility to internalize some of these lessons, to live from our heart, to kind of set an example for a new way of being. And so your soul did not make a mistake in coming here at this time. You have everything you need to handle the intensity, the pressure. You've got everything you need, and you are supposed to be here, and you're here as part of the revolution, part of the heart-centered revolution. So if you need support in handling some of the intensity and characteristic of these times, and the coronavirus has only intensified these things and kind of escalated them, then remember that Kundalini yoga, your practice, is here for you. You can spend time in nature, you can meditate, read spiritual books, read things that inspire you, you can journal. There's a lot of things you can do to bring you in alignment with that internal source of peace and well-being when the outside world feels overwhelming. All right, let's transition into our pranayama. We're going to continue with segmented breathing like we did last week, but this time the breath is intended to be calming and centering. And so we're going to inhale, we're going to break the inhale into 8 segmented sniffs, and then we're going to break the exhale into 8 segmented sniffs, or just segments. And so it'll sound like this, like as you inhale. If you want to practice with me, you can. So exhale completely, get all the air out, and then inhale in 8 sniffs. And then exhale 8. And just as a reminder, you want to keep the face relaxed. Keep your body relaxed. You don't want to scrunch up your face or tense your body to make the sniffs happen. They can be gradual and gentle. All right, so that is it. Let's get started with our meditation. So bring yourself coming up to tall, whether you're seated or standing. Elongate the spine. Lift the crown of the head to the heavens. Tuck the chin gently down and back, feeling that opening in the back of the neck. Rolling the shoulders up, back, and down. Closing the eyes. Focusing the eyes at that third eye. And then we'll take a couple long, deep breaths together before we start the segmented breath. So inhaling through the nose, filling up your belly, ribs, and chest. Exhaling, chest, ribs, and belly. One more long, deep breath like that, getting a full inhale. And complete exhale. Once all the air is out, begin inhaling in your 8 sniffs. Exhale 8. Inhale 8. Exhale 8. Each breath continuing to inhale through 8 sniffs, exhaling 8, going at your own pace. And as you get more practice, you begin to focus on making sure you're getting a full inhale and full exhale with each set of 8. And then if your mind is wandering or you'd like a mantra to focus on, you can use the mantra Sa, Ta, Na, Ma, Wa, He, Gu, Ru. And then exhale. Sa, Ta, Na, Ma, Wa, He, Gu, Ru. But going at your own pace. Gently scan your body, see if there's anywhere you can release tension, maybe your jaw or your shoulders. One more round. Inhaling deeply through the nose. Suspend your breath. Eyes are still closed. Focus the third eye. Exhale. Keeping your eyes closed, relax the breath. Bring your awareness, just checking in with your mental, emotional, and spiritual state. Noting if you feel more calm and centered than you did when you began. Remembering that this pranayama and all the other pranayams we've practiced are always here for you. The mind follows the breath in just 3 minutes. So when you're having a hard time, a better state of mind and state of heart is always just 3 minutes away. And blink open your eyes. Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us for this special episode. As I said, in the next couple of episodes, we'll discuss additional characteristics of the Aquarian Age. If you want to be notified when those are published, you can subscribe to our podcast in iTunes or wherever you're listening to podcasts, and they will let you know when a new episode comes up. And then, like I said, if you want to see all 10 characteristics written out, just as kind of as a reminder, they will be on the page for this series of episodes. So you can go to heartcenteredrevolution.com/episode 38. And we have one additional request while you're subscribing to the podcast. If you're on iTunes, if you could leave us a review and a rating, that would help us kind of spread the word. iTunes shares podcast based on their people's interests, but also based on the reviews for the podcast. So if you could give us a review, it'll help us spread the word about Kundalini Yoga. Okay, thanks so much. We love you. Take care of yourself. Sat Nam.